All right. So this article just was posted by NBC News. Woman's arrest after miscarriage in Georgia draws fear and anger. Experts say the arrest is part of a pattern of criminalizing pregnancy that has accelerated since the fall of Roe v. Wade. I mean, that is how much these people hate the idea of a woman having control over her own body. Because, and I'm pretty sure this is the case here, because this woman had a miscarriage, I bet she had a DNC because sometimes nature needs a little help cleaning it up. That the assumption is that the woman had an abortion. It couldn't possibly be that she had a miscarriage and then needed help getting the fetus and or the placenta out. No, she must have had an abortion. It's getting to the point where you cannot even provide care for miscarriages anymore. Simply because the anti-choicers, the forced birthers, are so afraid of certain procedures. Now, I have seen comments saying, oh, but this is an abortion, so it's fine. The fact is that if you use a procedure like you would in an abortion, people are going to assume, these dum-dums are going to assume you had an abortion. Because why else would you have an abortion procedure? That would require, I don't know, knowing shit. Anyway, let's get to the article. On March 20th in rural Georgia, an ambulance responded to an early morning 911 call about an unconscious bleeding woman at an apartment. When first responders arrived, they determined that she'd had a miscarriage. That was only the start of her ordeal. Okay, so I was wrong. It's not because she had a procedure that could be construed as an abortion. It's the fact that she probably either couldn't or was too afraid to go to the hospital because of the abortion ban. So she miscarried at home, but because there was all sorts of blood, the assumption was she gave herself an abortion, I guess. Selena Maria Chandler Scott was transported to a hospital, but witness reported that she had placed the fetal remains in a dumpster. When police investigated, they recovered the remains, and Chandler Scott was charged with concealing the death of another person and abandoning a dead body. The charges were ultimately dropped. An autopsy determined Chandler Scott had had a natural miscarriage at around 19 weeks and the fetus was non-viable. Okay, so I see why they were investigating. Because she just disposed of the remains, which, I mean, what else was she supposed to do? Go to the hospital and say, oh, here. I mean, seriously, I'm honestly asking, what was she supposed to do? Well, obviously she should have gone to the hospital, but given the abortion ban in Georgia, she was probably afraid of what would happen if she went there needing a miscarriage. Well, not needing a miscarriage, but having a miscarriage. God knows what she thought was going to happen. Of course, what's happening to her now, not a lot better. Still, Chandler Scott's arrest comes at a time when a growing number of women are facing pregnancy-related prosecutions in which the fetus is treated as a person with legal rights, and her experience raises troubling questions about miscarriages that happen in states with strict abortion laws, women's health advocates say. How should remains be disposed of, and who gets to decide? And that's what I asked. What was she supposed to do? Go to the hospital and say, here you go? Or go to the police station and say, see, I had a miscarriage? Seriously, what was she supposed to do besides feeling safe to go to the hospital when she started having a miscarriage to begin with? Georgia's 6-week abortion ban, the Living Infants Fairness and Equality Act, or LIFE Act, provides any fetus with a heartbeat legal recognition under the law. And it's iffy whether at 6 weeks you hear a heartbeat. It might eventually become a heartbeat, but what you're hearing is not a heartbeat. Though the push for fetal personhood provisions like this one predates the 2022 Dobbs decision that overturned Roe v. Wade, experts say it has intensified since. Roughly 24 personhood bills have been introduced in the first 3 months of this year, according to the Guttmacher Institute, a research organization that supports reproductive rights. Jill Weber Lenz, a professor at the University of Iowa College of Law and an expert on stillbirth and pregnancy loss, sees wider implications in Chandler Scott's arrest. Research shows that 10 to 20% of known pregnancies end in miscarriage, most often in the first trimester. If what comes out of you in a miscarriage is a dead human body and you can't abandon that, you can't put that in the trash, you can't flush it down the toilet, Len said, most people experiencing miscarriage are also apparently committing crimes in Georgia. Yes. Legal experts have drawn comparisons between Chandler Scott's arrest and that of Brittany Watts, a then 34-year-old woman in Warren, Ohio, who was charged with abuse of a corpse after his miscarriage in 2023, though the charges were later dropped. In January, she filed a lawsuit against the city and hospital where she sought care. Neither the hospital nor the police responded to requests for comment, but the hospital filed a response in court denying wrongdoing. The case is still pending. In an interview last year, Watts said she feared a similar arrest could happen again. As the old saying goes, history repeats itself, Watts said. I don't want it to happen in this case. Advocates say the number of pregnant people facing criminal charges for conduct linked to pregnancy rose after Dobbs. At least 20 women were charged in the year that followed, according to a 2024 report from Pregnancy Justice, a reproductive rights group. And again, I'm sure a lot of those miscarriages involved a DNC because, again, it's got to come out somehow. Women of color, lower-income women, and women struggling with substance use are particularly vulnerable in interactions with authorities, advocates say. Dana Sussman, Senior Vice President, Pregnancy Justice, an advocacy organization, said she was glad to hear that the charges against Chandler Scott had been dropped. On the one hand, this is terrific news, she said, but it doesn't undo the very real harm and devastation charges like these bring in the first place. I might add the fact that, it's entirely possible she did not know what was happening, so she didn't even, or she couldn't make it to a hospital. That's also possible. Chandler Scott's arrest is just one example of how Georgia is harming women's health and lives, says Monica Simpson, executive director of Sister Song, an Atlanta-based reproductive justice organization that has challenged the state's abortion ban in court. Last year, Amber Thurman died after she reportedly had to wait nearly a day for surgery that experts said could have saved her life. The picture that's being painted in Georgia is a very grim one, Simpson said. Georgians are not asking for more restrictions or more surveillance. We're actually asking to have more health care, to have more access. Georgia recently held a hearing on a personhood bill that would have allowed people who end their pregnancies to be charged with murder. We have turned Roe v. Wade around. Let's go ahead and just bring back life to the unborn. Representative Emory Donahue, a Republican, told an NBC affiliate. The bill died this week without a vote. What? Let's just go ahead and bring back life to the unborn? I'm sorry, what? You want to resurrect the dead? Is that what I'm hearing? What is happening? Sally Harrell, a Democratic state senator from Atlanta, speaking at the state capitol this week, said the Chandler Scott case demonstrates the idiocy of fetal personhood. This is terrifying for women of reproductive age in Georgia, she said. The Tift County District Attorney's Office, which handled Chandler Scott's case, did not answer a list of detailed questions from NBC News and referred instead to a press release about the charges being dismissed. In that release, District Attorney Patrick Warren said his office had determined that the fetus had not been born alive, and pursuing the case against Chandler Scott was not in the interest of justice. Well, at least somebody is at least somewhat with it. The office referred additional questions about the case to the police department, which did not respond. A person answering a contact listed for Chandler Scott said it was not her number. A relative did not immediately respond to requests for comment. In these sensitive moments of her life, it has caused her not only... In these sensitive moments of her life, it has caused not only her, but her family emotional, financial, and mental stress, an online fundraiser for Chandler Scott states. Warren acknowledged in his press release that some in the community might be unhappy with his decision to drop the charges. And those people are Looney Tunes. This case is heartbreaking and emotionally difficult for everyone involved, he said, but our decision must be grounded in law, not emotion or speculation. Like I said, it's nice to know that he accepts that miscarriages are a thing. That is good to know. The fact that there are actually people out there who act like miscarriages couldn't possibly happen, or they've heard that miscarriages are also referred to as spontaneous abortions and just cling to the word abortion and ignore that it's naturally occurring. It's not something anyone intended. Or at least if you're religious, maybe God intended it. But no human did. So at least the Attorney General understands miscarriages are a thing. But this is one of the many reasons why you shouldn't be restricting healthcare for women. Well, you shouldn't be restricting healthcare for anyone, but let's face it, nobody's going to restrict healthcare for men. You restrict a woman's right to healthcare, and this sort of thing happens. A woman has a miscarriage, and there's blood everywhere because of the miscarriage, and immediately they assume the worst. I mean, I would understand it if they were concerned about infanticide. But she had a miscarriage at 19 weeks. I don't think that infanticide is on the table. And they could have easily gone to the dumpster and discovered that immediately. So the fact that they arrested her and took the remains implies that they were deathly afraid that she had an abortion. And God forbid that a woman would decide what's best for her. Now, like I said, it would have been better if she went to a hospital and let them help with the procedure, because then they could say definitively, yes, she's having a miscarriage, everything's fine. I can only hope that the police would actually give a shit that the hospital said that. But this is where we have stooped to. Women having miscarriages alone in their apartment. Again, maybe she didn't have time to go to the hospital, or she didn't know to go. But it's highly likely that this 6-week abortion ban is freaking her out, and she was afraid to go to the hospital. I mean, either way, regardless of whether she thought she should have gone to the hospital but was too afraid, or she just didn't have the time to actually go, it doesn't matter. The fact is that a woman has a miscarriage in her apartment, and everyone's first thought is arrest her, charge her with murder, because there was remains. And I don't think they would have cared that it was a non-viable pregnancy, because they want this fetal personhood nonsense to get through, because that would criminalize miscarriages. I mean, come on. That is just ridiculous. Miscarriages happen. And abortions need to happen on occasion. It's not like women just decide, I don't feel like being pregnant, so I'm just going to go have an abortion. That's not how this works. Granted, even if it was, it wouldn't be any of your damn business, because a woman gets to decide how she wants to live her life. Would I think that that makes her pretty shitty, that would be her excuse? Absolutely. But it's still within her rights. But that's generally not what happens. Women don't say, I don't feel like being pregnant. There are reasons for not wanting to be pregnant. There could be financial, emotional, medical. I mean, and if later on in the pregnancy they might get the devastating news that the fetus is non-viable, that either it will be a stillbirth, or that the baby will live few minutes, and you decide you don't want to put your child through that. I mean, just think about it. The people who claim that they are doing this to give life to the unborn, to ensure that the unborn has a chance at life, what about the fetus that isn't viable? How is this showing sympathy to this fetus? It's not viable. You're just giving it a few seconds of misery before the baby dies. I fail to see how this is compassion. This isn't compassion. This isn't anything but you want to force women to have babies for the sin of having sex. Even if this woman happens to be married, have other children, and bad things just happen, well, we can't have you deciding for yourself what you're going to do with your life. If, if this pregnancy ends up killing you or preventing you from having children in the future, well, I guess that would be, I'm pretty sure these people would say, I guess that's God's plan, and oh well, it sucks to be you. As opposed to treating women like thinking human beings, as opposed to glorified incubators who, might have a life of their own, dreams, wishes, and like I said, might be married, might have kids already, and she just, horrible things happen. So she wants to be sure that she's there for her family, potentially trying again eventually to have another child. It's not for anybody else to decide. But I'm pretty sure that that's what happened here. She was so afraid. Now, I could be wrong. Like I said, maybe she didn't even have time to go to the hospital. I mean, miscarriages don't exactly wait for you to get to the hospital. I mean, if labor doesn't wait, why should miscarriages? So, yeah. So, yeah, this is totally messed up that she goes through a miscarriage. She's probably devastated because if you're going through a miscarriage, if you're 19 weeks along, you're probably wanting to have the kid and to end up miscarrying and then get arrested because the assumption is that she's guilty. Instead of the court of law of being innocent until proven guilty, the police have decided that she must be guilty because there's all this blood and she was pregnant and she isn't anymore. So she must have killed the kid somehow, whether it's infanticide or an abortion. She must have killed the kid because, they couldn't possibly have had a miscarriage. I mean, that would just make too much sense. So anyway, I'm rambling now. So with that, I will see you guys in the next video.